Islam does not negate or take away from someone having a lot of wealth. Being filthy rich, having billions of dollars in our time, does not in any way contradict your religiosity and your spirituality as a believer and as a Muslim. In fact, it might enhance it in so many different ways.
Is the pursuit of profit acceptable in Islam? In a world driven by capitalism, how does Islam guide Muslim entrepreneurs to achieve a balance between financial and spiritual success? And what does a business with Islamic ethics look like? Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Tijarah Academy Podcast, where we help aspiring Muslim entrepreneurs launch and grow their small businesses. My name is Hanif, and in this first episode of the podcast, we'll delve into the Islamic perspective on business and entrepreneurship. So, if you've ever wondered how to align your entrepreneurial journey with Islam, this episode is for you. I'm really excited to be joined by my co-host and co-founder, Mufti Abraar Alli, who brings a wealth of knowledge to this topic. Mufti Abraar wears many hats, mashallah. He's an assistant imam, the founder and director of the Al-Ihsan Institute, a principal and a business owner. He lives on the beautiful island of Trinidad, and I had the pleasure of meeting him back in 2020 when I was in Trinidad for business, having just quit my 9-to-5 to focus on my consultancy work full-time. Mufti Abraar, it's an absolute pleasure to have you as my co-host on the Tijarah Academy podcast, but also as our resident scholar and expert on today's episode. First up, let's just dive straight in. What does Islam say about entrepreneurship?
So Islam does talk about all the different aspects of our lives. Quite frankly, we hear from the member or from the khutbahs and the lectures and so on a lot about our ibadah and our direct ibadah and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed certain practices and certain rituals to earn His pleasure. But similarly, Islam talks about our responsibilities that we have in this world. And one of those responsibilities is earning a living, earning for your family members, for yourself, for your extended dependents. And it is such an important aspect that it is wajib. It is necessary upon every believer male to ensure that he is providing for his dependents. That being said, Islam then focuses on the earning of a person, and that be by trade, by working for someone. However it is that he earns in a halal way, it is definitely something that has been addressed in the Sharia. A quick fun fact about this just popped in my mind. If a male in a family is not fulfilling his responsibility with regard to his earnings and providing for his family, after much deliberation by an Islamic court, Islamic judge, and so on, Sharia court, whatever it be, to determine his responsibility being negligent, his wife can actually request a divorce based on him not earning. That shows, that just shows the impact that it has on a believer and the responsibility he has in ensuring that he is fulfilling that responsibility. So that being said, your question is what does Islam, what responsibility Islam has placed on a male or not a male, on a person? It's a very big...
Yeah, or just generally, what does Islam say about entrepreneurship? So from your answer, we obviously understand that for males over a certain age, those who have dependents, it's incumbent upon them to earn. And I suppose we could have a completely different podcast about why is it just men and not women, and so on. So we might have to do that one day. And we also know, obviously, from our own history that there were so many female entrepreneurs famous, not least of course our mother Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. So, and I suppose in this day and age as well, given the way the world is and how much people are struggling, it's very hard to make ends meet with just one person's salary. So a lot of times the women are having to work as well just to make ends meet. So I suppose the entrepreneurs that we're going to be talking about could be male or female as well. But what does Islam say generally about entrepreneurship?
Right. So I touched on that a little bit about earning. So generally, you have to earn. And moreover, when you go into that topic of entrepreneurship, a lot of times it might be referred to in the books of fiqh as tijarah, as buyu, bay. So these are words as used in books of fiqh, in even hadith and so on. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam practically showed a great degree of entrepreneurship or trade, or you would say business, being a business person, practically as well, and also in the Quran as well. Different aspects of trade has been mentioned. And the reason why I mentioned first the importance of earning is because it all ties in. You need to be earning a living. And one of the easy ways of doing so is in entrepreneurship and doing business on your own, because it gives you that sense of flexibility. It gives you a sense of drive. It even connects you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a meaningful way that may not connect in any other way. So there is a whole, amount of information that you can get, a lot of information, inshallah, that we'll be going through about the importance of entrepreneurship and also that of Islam and its guidance in this field, inshallah.
So that's really interesting. I think one of the things you said we should probably clarify when you said it's an easy way of earning a living. We'll probably qualify that by saying it's one of the ways of earning a living. It's not easy in the way that people might understand that statement, but I know what you mean. I don't know if you just want to qualify that a bit.
So that's fine, and that's actually a good point. Easy. I mean, that's subjective to everyone's easy, right? And circumstances and so on, obviously. But when I do say easy, I think we all accept, and inshallah, we'll be going through some of those things as we expand in this whole course, inshallah, and the different benefits that we will highlight for our viewers. But business is a bit difficult. A lot of times it's risky. A lot of times it's a lot of hard work, and it takes a long time to mature into being a full-fledged business and a operation that actually brings in income. So yes, easy itself, from the practical aspect of it, it's not that easy, right? When we do say easy, it does bring about, after the hard effort and hard work, it brings about a certain amount of control that you can definitely be appreciative of. And I think that is, I think in the long term, as you would say, comes about after doing the work, after understanding how it works, the perspectives that you should have as a business person, the ethics and the morals of a Muslim, the guidances of Islam. It actually becomes somewhat easy, and much easier than many people in their, as you would say, 8 to 4 or whatever timings that they go in, that as referred to the rat race. It's not like that. It's a lot more meaningful. So inshallah, there is ease in it, and as the Quranic principle, inna ma'al usri yusra. So with usra and with difficulty, there is a type of ease that comes about for certain in this world and the hereafter, inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, and that's the double ease, right? And I think that's a really interesting distinction, the difference between something being easy and something bringing ease. So it might not necessarily be easy. We have to work quite hard at it. But if you do work hard at it, and if Allah Azza wa Jal blesses you and inshallah grants barakah, then it can bring a lot of ease into your life. And that point that you make about the rat race is just so important. So many of us are, I think in Trinidad might be 8 to 4. In the UK, it's a 9 to 5. We're just lazy. We get up later than you guys. So the 9 to 5, the hustle, having to go in, answer to someone day in, day out. For most people, that's what they're going to do. Entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. I think anyone who's ever tried it can attest to that. But it is for a lot of people. And there are certain characteristics that you need to have, and we can always obviously talk about that either later in this episode or in a future episode, inshallah. One of the things that's really interesting is, we're talking about needing to make money, and it's incumbent on the believer, like you said, who's male, of a certain age, who has dependents, to go out and earn. And we don't scrounge off other people. If we're able to, we go out and we earn money with our own hands. The mechanisms of doing that, obviously work is one of those. Entrepreneurship is one of those. If people have money, that's probably quite a bit of money, and they invest, that can bring them a return without having to do much. And those people are probably not the majority. People have that much wealth, and probably fewer still are those who are just really lucky and daddy's got a lot of money or mummy's got a lot of money and they don't have to do anything. But thinking about entrepreneurship, one of the things that really sometimes puts people off, I think, when they think about entrepreneurship and Islam, is this idea that business is almost somewhat dirty. It's all about making money and a profit, and people shouldn't be profit driven and so on. How do Islamic teachings balance financial and spiritual success? Because a lot of people would think of those as being polar opposites.
So in answering that, was an interesting point that comes to my mind. Looking at the lives of the pious predecessors, and why I say that is because I'll take you on a little journey. When a person, for example, studies and becomes a scholar, goes through, intensive studies after many years, goes to a seminary, whatever part of the world that you go. A lot of times, our efforts are dedicated towards improving Deen, improving Islam, teaching Islam, because the core of the efforts of the Messenger of Allah has been to teach the book of Allah, teach the hikmah of Allah, spread the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and basically teach Islam so that people can directly and indirectly worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that little intro there, one of the little difficulties that can be faced as a full-time scholar or someone who dedicates their time for Islam has been to earn your own and be able to provide for your family in a way that is comfortable enough to fulfill all of their needs. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of struggle, and at the end of the day, I think everyone goes through this. But when you have focus in your life and you have to earn, it becomes double difficult. The reason why I'm saying this is that when we look back at the pious predecessors, because these are what you would consider our examples and those people that we would look up to and try to figure out how to practically implement Islam as a top tier level, which Allah will become so happy with you and pleased with you, and inshallah get eventual Jannatul Firdaus and His pleasure. So when you look at the lives of pious predecessors, you find that a lot of them would actually be involved in trade, and a lot of them would have gone out during the day, gone to the markets, gone to the bazaars, gone to the malls, whatever it is, so in context to our time, and they would sell their items, and then they would come back, and then they would dedicate the rest of their days towards teaching and learning and so on. And you have some great examples of that, like that of Imam Hanif rahimahullah. He was a trader as well. When you look at the life of the prophets of Allah, many of them were traders. You look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is a prime example. He would have done so much trading or had been a trader in his early days, and then afterwards, obviously, with the mission being a bigger one, getting prophethood and that being the focus point of the entire ummah, he would have switched to that direction fully. Nevertheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also made provision for the earnings or the the actual finance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that being said,
just on that point, actually, for people who might not know, because they might not have studied the seerah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started off as an employee, didn't he, as a shepherd, and didn't earn much from that, but because of his character and his trustworthiness, actually something we can speak about later, he became known to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha before they were married, and she was quite wealthy, and because of the society, she was an entrepreneur herself in a lot of respects, wasn't she? And because of the fact that in that society especially, women weren't, you know, the ones who went out and traded because you had to travel and so on. She then had to get someone to do that on her behalf, and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was recommended to her, and this is before him receiving prophethood. And so just in case anyone wasn't aware of that, so I'm sure most people
and that's a simple incident brings up so many different lessons, inshallah, and we'll talk about them. But one of them is that when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam started trading for Khadija, she was impressed the type of returns that he would bring because of his honesty, because of his character, because of, you know, he being guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. He would bring back better returns than any other trader that ever traded for her. So she was amazed with his strengths, you know, in also that aspect of trade. Obviously, so many different beautiful attributes that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have had. But one of the key ones that would have probably made that connection was trade and entrepreneurship and tijarah. So that's why we have to have that conversation, and we need to think about, you know, is that an option for me as a Muslim, as a person, because it's quite prophetic as well.
The pious predecessors is one of the things we spoke about recently, was that if it was not for the entrepreneurs and the ones who had wealth, you and I and most of the world wouldn't even be Muslim today. You know, so the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a message, and he needed to deliver that message, and that needed funding. You know, the project needed funding. And so if it wasn't for the likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, if it wasn't for the likes of Uthman bin Affan, Abdullah bin I forgot his name. Abdullah bin Auf. Radiallahu anhum ajma'in. Abdurrahman bin Auf. That's why I was getting confused. Yeah, Abdurrahman bin Auf. If it wasn't for the likes of them, we would not be Muslim today, because the project would not have received funding. And so there's such an important role for entrepreneurs, isn't there, in wider society? And I think we're going to do a separate episode about that, but I don't know if you just want to touch on that.
Furthering that same point that you just raised, the reality is that Islam was not spread with going and conquering lands and spread by the sword, as misconception had been shared, right? The reality is that Islam was spread with a lot of traders and a lot of business persons going out there and bringing products throughout the world. And they expanded more and more territory because of the trade that they were doing, and pushing out further and further, selling and buying and selling. And in fact, in the books of history, it's mentioned about the Muslim traders were the traders that people would look forward to, and they would try to get involved with them, and they were the prime people to do business with, because of so many different qualities of a Muslim trader, that being of honesty and social responsibility, ensuring the product is mentioned, the quality of the product, and so many different things, and that balance that they would have obviously with their religion and trading and so on. So yes, it had a massive impact in the spread of Islam.
Yeah, super important point, because it was there, and it wasn't like they were going to other countries to be missionaries. They were going there to trade.
Exactly.
But they were walking, talking dawah. And people saw that and were just so impressed that they just wanted to know, why is it that you guys are like this? Because we've not seen such honest business people before. And then they would say, it's because of what we believe. And then that was the dawah. Something I want to ask you about, though, is this idea of on the one hand, needing to make money. But on the other hand, we know that in Islam, we're not supposed to be, attached to wealth and attached to dunya, this concept of zuhud. And how do you balance those two?
So Islam does not negate or take away from someone having a lot of wealth. Being filthy rich, having billions of dollars in our time, does not in any way contradict your religiosity and your spirituality as a believer and as a Muslim. In fact, it might enhance it in so many different ways, because a person who has a lot of wealth can fulfill some of the obligations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on wealth and connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that are so meaningful and so impactful that can score him way higher than other persons. So, intrinsically, wealth does not have any type of opposition to being a Muslim, being a good Muslim, or having that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it actually enhances it and strengthens it. The notion, though, of becoming attached to that wealth and having, a love for it such that it dictates your life, it impacts your life and influences it negatively and turns it away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns so many places and so many different times in the Quran, in the Hadith and so on. It's because it's something that can be very inviting. It's something that can overtake you and really it's something that's very enticing. Let's just put it that way. It's something that can get you really quickly hooked on if you're not mindful of it. But that,
and Allah tells us about that in the Quran so many times, doesn't it? Like you say, the easy one that probably a lot of people will know is وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. Like, you guys have this crazy obsession and love affair with wealth.
And even with that, that has been highlighted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the mercy to mankind, to show mankind, hey, I'm giving you all the manual how to treat with certain things in your life. So, obviously you're going to do wrong things with it, then it's going to have a negative effect. But you do good things with it, then the benefits are tremendous. And, once you balance that, then that's fine. Recently, there's been, so many different accounts of things like cars, for example, being used in a negative way. Now, for years on end, people would never think a car can be something that used in a negative way, because a car is used for transportation. And now the mindset had always been a car is a beneficial asset of your life. You can transport things, you can move easily, freely, and all these things. But in recent times, people have used this this really good tool that everybody generally owns in a negative way. So it's just like
yeah, that's such a sorry, Sheikh. I was just going to say that's such an important point, because ultimately money for us is just, it's a means to an end, isn't it? It's just a tool, like you say, and you can use tools for good and you can use tools for bad. And that's what we're going to be asked about, because in and of itself, money isn't bad. In fact, it doesn't Allah Azza wa Jal call it khair, refer to it as khair in the Quran.
Okay, so I often advise as well people who have wealth that the ibadah of wealth and spending wealth is something that is very impactful and one that gains Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward. And it's one of the easy ibadah that you can do. Think about the 5 pillars of Islam. Each one of them requires a certain amount of effort, timing, occurrence to ensure the amount of benefit that you can get from each ibadah. And each ibadah does have a certain amount of benefit in it. But when it comes to spending, it's one of the things that you can quickly get the right intention, because obviously intention is very important. And without that intention, you can't even make it a proper ibadah, right? So First, you make the intention, and as soon as you make the intention, you can literally take out money from your pocket. You could send a transfer. You can send it however you want to send it. But as soon as it's handed over, you can, inshallah, secure that benefit of spending, of an ibadah, of earning Allah's pleasure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given so many different virtues for that spender, that person who gives for his sake. So it's an ibadah that is really, really impactful, and one that is very easy as well to do.
And I suppose the point you're making is that you can't spend what you don't have. And I think, as most people know, most of the people with wealth in the world, not always, but most of the people with wealth in the world are business people, because you can make money in a way that you can't working for somebody else most of the time, generally speaking. So that's the point you're making, isn't it?
Yes, and so when a person becomes a successful businessman, as you would say, and has gained that level of influence, that level of power, that level of spending, he can definitely, or she can definitely impact good practices in the world, and then in Allah's pleasures, like 2, 3, 4 times the ability of someone who does not have that ability. So all in all, what I'm saying is that having wealth does not anyway compromise your religiosity. It just gives you importance to understanding wealth and having wealth. But definitely is one of the easy ways to get to Allah's pleasure and to earn Jannatul Firdaus, inshallah.
Yeah, and just probably to clear up a bit of a misconception, and I can check my understanding of this with you. I think sometimes people will hear a hadith like the one that most people know, the poor people enter Jannah 500 years before the rich people, and think, well, it's much better to be poor then, isn't it? You get into Jannah like 500 years before. But that's not really the point of the hadith, is it? The hadith isn't saying that the poor are better than the rich, because it doesn't say that when the poor get into Jannah that they will be in a higher station than the rich. That's the hadith doesn't say that. And the way that I like to understand this is it's a bit like doing your tax return at the end of the year. If you're poor, you don't have much to write.
Right.
So when you're filling that tax return in, when you have to do that hisab, there's not a lot to do, so it doesn't take you that long. But if you're someone who has a lot of wealth and money coming from different areas, for you to do that accounting at the end of the year, to do that hisab, it just takes longer. And so in the same way, in front of Allah Azza wa Jal on Yawm al-Qiyamah, may Allah make it easy for us and grant us all Jannatul Firdaus without any hisab, inshallah. But for those who are questioned, if you're poor, you just don't have to answer as many questions about what you did with your money in the same way a rich person would have to. Is that right, my understanding?
Of course, and that's definitely a really good point to bring up, because it does have that connotation that, having wealth and earning wealth is actually a negative part of Islam. And it's not like that. It's just showing the importance of accountability, and that every single thing would be accounted on the Day of Judgment, and everyone will have to account for everything that they had. So, a person who, for example, does not have to account for wealth may have to account for another aspect of the favors and the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, it just depends on how a person can understand the favors of Allah. But I think the better part of it is that you are going to be responsible for everything. So don't be things like extravagant. Don't be a person who is not concerned about the impact, the negative impact of wealth, that of spending in wrong things, who have a better availability to sometimes fit in. Be mindful of all those things, because you will be accounted.
And that's a nice segue into my next question, actually. So in Western capitalism, the primary goal is often just profit maximization. How much money can you make and how quickly can you make it? How does the Islamic perspective differ? What is a successful Islamically run business? What does that look like?
So in Islam, a business person or having wealth and having a thriving economy is one that will bring about benefit for everyone. So it's not going to be where everyone's for themselves, where there's a lot of, I say, fight down, or a person really would do anything it takes to ensure that he's successful and other people may not have that benefit at the same time. So Islam would put in a lot of the ethical codes in trading, would consider those people who you're trading with. One of those things in trade is something you would call the right of seeing. And this is one of the benefits of Islamic trade. And we do find some of those things being implemented in modern day trade as well. But this is 100 centuries old, have been implemented in Islam, because Islamic Sharia is complete. So it would have had certain principles of trade that ensures that the customer's rights is being fulfilled fully. So one of those things is seeing a defect or seeing it itself. So if a person sees an item, then he buys it, that's fine because he was able to view it. But say, for example, you bought it online and it came to you, but you did not see the item previous to it coming to you. And then you looked at it and you found that, I'm not comfortable with this quality, or I don't like the shade of the color, or, I don't like how it looks in my kitchen, whatever it is. Then that's enough of a reason to say, no, I'm not ready. I will not take that item, I'll send it back. And that's the right of a customer. The point I'm making is there are certain intrinsic principles of trade that it has been implemented in Islam. And that would ensure that everyone wins. And when you understand that, you would understand that Islamic systems and Islamic economic systems is meant to grow others as well as one side. It's not going to be in detriment to anyone else. And it would ensure that everyone wins when some type of trade or some type of benefit is undertaken. So I think essentially
there's so many...
the difference between, a capitalist system and an ideal Islamic economy.
Yeah, there's so many threads there to pick on. I think just even if we're thinking about, the character of a proper Muslim entrepreneur, like you say, even something like defects, because it's not allowed in Islam, is it, to hide defects when you're selling something? And isn't that one of the kind of linguistic definitions of kufr? Anyway, it just means to cover and to hide. And so for us, it's not something that we're allowed to do. I had just a funny anecdote. I'm in the middle of, we're trying to sell our house at the moment. And a friend of mine was interested potentially in buying the house. And he said to me, before I come, can you just send me a video or some pictures of the house? I said, I'll send you a video. I'll do a little tour for you. He said, I just want to show my wife. So I said, maybe you might not be used to it, but as I go around in the video, I'm just going to show you all the things that are wrong with the house that need fixing. And then I sent it to him, and then he came back and he said, my brother saw it, and he said, you're like the worst estate agent ever.
Yes, that's
I was saying, listen, I showed you the good things, but I just needed to tell you like what needs fixing, because at the end of the day, this, like you say, in Islam, we don't view entrepreneurship and business as a zero-sum game. Like, for me to win and make money, you have to lose and lose money, because for us, it's so antithetical to our approach, not just to business, but to Islam and our entire aqidah, because ultimately what we're saying that Allah's barakah is in some way limited. We know that he can give to me, he can give to you, he can give to everyone, and it won't reduce a single thing from what it is that we have. And I think that kind of mindset, when it comes to being successful, sorry, go on, Sheikh.
No, that's exactly so. And even with that, it actually is the stepping stone of the biggest question that separates Islamic economy and these capitalist systems and so on. is the fact of riba and interest-based transactions, and that's the glaring elephant in the room. That's the big thing that changes a lot of the transactions of Islam, and the major hikmah and reasoning behind it is that the people who are less fortunate, the people who are not able to, they are the ones who suffer from an interest-based system, and everyone else who is able, who is financially comfortable, who is doing the business, they're the ones that gain and gain and gain, and it just keeps building more and more for them. So that's some of the fundamental differences that separates that, and not just called Islamic, but ethical financing, ethical economy, and that capitalist system.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have a completely separate episode just on riba, and well, I think you could just do a whole episode, at least one, on riba, because the more I learn about it, the more I realize, oh my God, this is actually really complicated. It's not what we think of it to be, the interest that we see on a bank statement or just the interest on a mortgage. It's just so much more complicated that, like, even things like part exchange, is that allowed in a business, or is that a type of riba? When I found that out, I was like, okay, wait, I need to study and I need to learn, because if we want to run a business Islamically and be successful, we have to know the rules. Just like, I suppose, if we're going to go and pray or fast or do whatever it is, we have to know the rules. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, that we've set up Tijarah Academy, so that people like you can educate people like me, inshallah, and some of the others that are watching. Just thinking about that idea of riba, though, how difficult do you think it is to run a business Islamically when you live in a non-Muslim country?
So I do see there's a lot of challenges, because one of the big things that obviously keeps the movement, things like cash flow, being able to reinvest, to grow bigger as time goes by. In fact, to start off initial investments and so on. A lot of times it has been riba-based systems, and banks generally look at those type of systems to be able to finance growth. So it is super difficult in that starting of that area. But Islam does have certain solutions that, is obviously going to be much better, much stronger, much more stable. And I think it's a world issue that if we were to start looking into the Islamic systems and these ethical-based financing, it actually becomes much more stable. Like, we won't go into this. Like, we look at the housing crash that took place in America, and I think it was 2008, was it?
Yeah, across the world, in America, and affected
everyone,
right?
all over the world. But the point is that that whole system is based on systems that are going to eventually have major issues like what we've seen. And that being said, Islamic financing itself is a whole topic. Inshallah, we'll talk about that. But there are certain products and Islamic systems that we can definitely use to be able to then go into business and investments and so on. And a lot of times, again, it's where we have a social responsibility. There's partnerships taking place. There's group and pool financing that's happening, and it's conversations that definitely needs to be done, especially in the Muslim world. And alhamdulillah, one of the things that has been developing consistently in the last probably 20 years is Islamic financing. And inshallah, that's a whole topic in itself. But as you're asking, yeah, it is going to be a little difficult sometimes. But there are solutions as well. And just remember, obviously, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls everything. And when a person puts out the effort, obviously turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do istikhara, and, it's just sincere in the efforts. Inshallah, these are the main ingredients that get, success even in business, inshallah.
Inshallah. There's just a quick point on something you were saying there. I think from my personal experience, being in the UK, which obviously isn't a Muslim country, despite what the newspapers might say sometimes, but my personal experience is that it's easier to be a better Muslim as an entrepreneur than it is if you're working for somebody else, particularly a non-Muslim organization. Because when you work for somebody else, you don't have complete control over your environment. And as an entrepreneur, you do. You don't have complete control over your time. As an entrepreneur, you do. It doesn't mean you have a lot of time, and you have to be very careful with how you manage your time. And I think that would probably for sure is one of the biggest complaints of entrepreneurs, is not having time and not having balance in our lives and so on. But you can control your environment. You can say no to things. You don't have to take an interest-based loan. You don't have to do X. You don't have to do Y. It might appear that will be detrimental financially if you don't take some of those options that are available. But then that's where tawakkul in Allah Azza wa Jal comes in. I don't know if you want to say anything quickly on tawakkul. I think we're going to have a separate episode on tawakkul as well, because it's just so important to business, life generally, but business especially.
Yes, surely. And yes, definitely. One of the, I think, key aspects of tawakkul that I really like to highlight is that in business, you get a sense of the reality of how important tawakkul is. And again, that would mean that you would get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in doing trade and entrepreneurship, because you're going to always have to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to always have that feeling that, you know what, I can't actually do this. I can't land this deal. I can't land this sale. I can't go out there and earn my monthly quota, except that I have to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that really connects a person in a way that you cannot easily be connected without having that type of consistent reminder that it's not you that brings about the profits and the benefits. It's definitely from Allah.
Yeah, I have to, just on that again, I think anyone who's gone from a 9 to 5 or just a job where you're on a salary and that money comes in regularly, to then running your own business, it's a bit of a shock to the system, where all of a sudden your wealth is, instead of just being regular, it's a roller coaster ride. Especially at the beginning, as the business is growing and settling down, you have these crazy kind of peaks and troughs. And when you're high, it's like amazing. And then the challenge is not to assume that this actually has anything to do with you, And then when you're down, it's hard, right? Like, I don't know what your thoughts are, because one of the things actually we haven't mentioned so far is not only are you, a mufti and a sheikh, mashallah, but you run businesses yourself. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Alhamdulillah. And even with me, I have, I do education as well. I have a school that I run. And even with that, just doing it for so many years. One is your personal interest, right? The other is you're running a school and you're trying to bring about a change in people's lives and children's abilities and so on. Every so often you have this moment that, you think, why am I doing this? Where's the financial gain in these things? And then afterward, you see someone coming about bringing some type of good quality forward, and basically they're expressing their closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see them doing something that that's going to become, inshallah, sadaqah jariyah, or a sadaqah that is perpetual, that really inspires you, and you're right back into that cycle again. You know what, I don't mind the difficulty I'm going through. I don't mind the efforts that I'm putting out. I know that what I'm doing here impacts people's lives. And similarly, in business, you have those moments all the time. And you really do connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day. Every day you realize that, when I get up, when I'm going out there to fight the world and conquer, you realize that, you need the biggest and most powerful power there is, Malikul Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And he's a sustainer, he is a razak, and he gives, he takes. When you have difficulty and you have loss, you turn to Allah right away, and you do either one or two things. You do istighfar, and you ask Allah, oh Allah, what did I do wrong that I need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiveness for? You feel that connection because you think, oh Allah, what did I do wrong for me to have this type of loss or this type of difficulty? And then you start thinking, maybe Allah gave me this because He's protecting me from something else. So it's a very live connection. And I believe that, the jobs that you have 9 to 4, you really don't see that becoming evident as the occurrence.
9 to 5. We're not that
9 to
bad.
5.
We do work the extra hour. Yeah.
So, as a business person, I think it happens like on a weekly basis that you have to reconnect Allah.
Yeah. If not daily.
Not daily. And if you're really,
or multiple times a day sometimes when it's really bad.
Yeah, and if you're really concerned about your Islam and your deen, you then start to do that really often, and you have those moments that you are going to turn to Allah every single day. And you know that if you don't do that, you know that if you don't perform some type of ibadah, if you're not punctual with your salah, if you're having discrepancies in your salah, for example, then you start realizing, hey, something's going wrong because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and you feel that there's a direct connection now with everything that is of your worldly affairs and your spiritual affairs. You feel that there's a live connection.
Yeah, I have to make a point there, because I think this is one of the things that we said we want to talk about through Tijarah Academy, is that, yes, inshallah, we will be talking about some of the practicalities of how you start a business and how you run a business. But one of the things we really want to look at is the fact that the world has certain laws, like physical laws, cause and effect, and so on. We understand gravity. What goes up must come down. But then there are certain spiritual realities, and Allah Azza wa Jal can, in an instant, kun fayakun, and everything changes. And He can make the fire cool for whoever He wants to. And there are certain spiritual rules and laws that don't make any sense logically, but we believe them because we're Muslims. And I think the most simple example is, if we say, okay, in business, let's say you have £10,000 or $10,000, and you spend $2,000. How much have you lost? It's like, well, I've lost $2,000. I've got $8,000 back. But you ask any Muslim and you say, okay, but if that $2,000 was given in sadaqah, how much have you lost? And every Muslim will say, well, nothing. Like, if anything, you've gained.
Yeah, exactly.
Logically, it doesn't make any sense, right? But spiritually, there are mechanisms that we don't understand and that we don't see. And there are so many of those. There's just one very simple example. And that's the point you're making, isn't it? That sometimes if business isn't going well, not all the time, but sometimes when business isn't going well and, there's issues with the rizq, maybe there's something else going on that actually isn't to do with the business. It might be to do with your ibadah, or somewhere else you're falling short in your life, and that is causing Allah Azza wa Jal's displeasure, and He's withholding that rizq from you.
And even with that, I think that just brings up so many incidents and stories in my mind. But sadaqah itself is one of the ways that Allah increases, and also with shukr and thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to people as well, increases your goodness, right? So because it's going to be something tangible, you can actually check, you can see numbers, you can see money, you start realizing that Allah has placed within your ibadah direct investments for yourself, and that's like so intrinsic in the whole chapters of sadaqah and trade and sadaqah and zakah and giving and being a philanthropist and so on. So that's why inshallah, Muslims are very generous people. But one of the reasons they're so generous is because they have been assured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that sadaqah and giving and zakah and any type of spending for a godly reason does not decrease your wealth. So they know, and that's why a business person will always be mindful that, what, when I made a big profit, when I got a good return, the first thing that I do is give out some of that for a good charitable cause. That's the first thing they'll do. A mindful Muslim will definitely always do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of benefits actually of being an entrepreneur, one of those benefits I think is the difficult times, because it keeps you so grounded. I think just from personal experience, in a way that you feel comfortable, don't you? It's like, oh, it's 9 to 5. I get paid every month on the first of the month or at the end of the month, and it comes like clockwork, and it's coming, it's expected, and you lose that connection with Allah Azza wa Jal. Most people anyway, most of us, who are flawed, we lose that connection with Allah Azza wa Jal because we forget that this is just an illusion. He's just chosen that means for us to receive it, and if he wanted to, he could stop it at any time. And so we don't have that same level of gratitude. I think in business, particularly in the early days when times are tough, you have a really strong connection. I think later on it can become challenging if you suddenly become really wealthy and think that is because of something that you've done. And we know, Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran that he never sent a messenger except that it was the wealthy people in the town who were the ones that kind of, were against the message and the messenger.
And
benefits of, sorry, go on, Sheikh.
One of the things, wealthy, influential. So influential, maybe even the better of the words. And there's so many things that we can talk about, but wealth brings influence as well. So that's a whole topic.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about kind of just really quickly, whatever we can think of, just a list of the potential benefits of being an entrepreneur over and above, working for somebody else.
So one of the things I really like about entrepreneurship, one is the flexibility. And inshallah, when a person, so that's one. But the second thing that I wanted to highlight is what I tell a lot of my, persons that I would interact with who Allah's blessed wealth. I said, what good is wealth if it does not benefit people? Right? So, a person can be very wealthy and stingy as well, and bakhil, as it's called,
there are plenty of people like that in the world. Yeah.
So what benefit is the wealth if you can't spend it on good things? That's what, even for the spender, gives him a comfort and a feeling that you can't get in any other way. It's like you're bringing up someone's lives, you're benefiting someone else's entire world. Their existence is benefiting.
And that can be your family as well, can't it? Because spending on your family is sadaqah as well, isn't it? As long as you don't obviously become extravagant.
Yes, definitely. So I think one of the benefits a person gets personally is he's able to make a difference in the world. He's able to help people's lives. He's able to influence change in people's lives. Wealthy people do have a lot of influence in general circles, in their communities, in their localities, or their what do you call these their constituencies. Sometimes accordingly it starts making that impact. And a person who's grounded in making, we were just doing a tree planting exercise a few days ago with our students, and I was showing them the benefit of planting a tree, and that even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about if the final hour is upon you, paraphrasing, and you have a tree in your hand, then plant that tree. Now, there's so many different things that you can mention about that hadith, right? But one of the things is the importance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed for the environment, and that a tree benefits others, right? A tree, when, like, for example, fruit trees, you would have a full ecosystem, but you would have animals eating from it, people eating from it, and all those things are sadaqah jariyah, sadaqah that will benefit you every year when there's a season. So the point is that khayrun nas anfa'uhum lin-nas. The best of you as Muslims, as believers, as people who follow Islam, is those people who are most beneficial to others. Because obviously you're going to have ripple benefits coming out of any benefit that you give someone else, inshallah. And that's how you create, this ideal world. And one of the very, very strong benefits that you can have that makes that happen is wealth. So I see that to be, I think, one of the prime benefits that a person of wealth or entrepreneurship can get, inshallah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses him with a successful business or her with a successful business. You can actually influence great change, beneficial change, one that helps others, one that supports others, and one that definitely earns Allah's pleasure and gets closer to Him.
Inshallah. There's the way I like to think about this is almost like concentric circles, like those Russian dolls. One thing inside another, and then it gets bigger. So we, at the center, I suppose, is yourself. And so when you're an entrepreneur, like you say, you can have flexibility. Like we spoke about before, you can choose that, no, I'm not going to do this because it doesn't align with my values, and I will do this because it's more Islamic. You can rearrange your schedule now around your prayers. You can try to make time and it's hard at the beginning. Like at the beginning, everybody knows, well, anyone who's run a business knows how difficult it is and how little time you have at the beginning because there's so many things to do. But inshallah, if you can work your way through that, you can make time for other things that are important. But you can now manage your time. You can do more ibadah. Like I said, even the difficult times can bring you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. You can pursue some goals that you have, and so on. So that's you at the center. Then slightly outward from that, you can start benefiting your family. If you have a bit more wealth and a bit more flexibility, you should be able to do things for them. I know it's one of the things that I've always struggled with is that finding that work-life balance, because and I think we'll have an episode of that on that, inshallah, because I think it's really important. Especially for business people, probably the biggest complaint is I don't have time for, X, Y, and Z, including looking after ourselves half of the time. But, in theory and in practice, if you know what you're doing, you can start making more time for your family and benefiting them financially and in other ways. Then you can start benefiting your community. Like we all know, behind most local masajid, particularly in the West, in non-Muslim countries, there are obviously the community who donated, but there are always some business people who donated a huge amount that actually made the project happen, and without whom it might not have happened. And then, if you start extending that out, even actually to the people who are your clients, because as Muslims, we're not interested in tricking people. We're not interested in selling people something that's rubbish or something that they don't need or something that's poor quality. So we're trying to improve their lives. It's not a zero-sum game. We benefit and they benefit. It's an exchange, isn't it, of goodness, inshallah. And then, let's take that out, like you say, even to the political realm. Let's look around what's happening in the world at the moment. Who is influencing things? We've seen even with the protests at the universities, who are the ones who are pressuring the universities to clamp down on the brave brothers and sisters who are out there protesting. It's the people who have money, who donated to the universities, and that has bought them certain influence. And take it one step further, they're the ones who are buying the prime ministers and presidents and all of these sorts of things. So they're impacting global affairs. And that, for me, is the way I like to think about entrepreneurship. I know today we're kind of focused on the immediate closest circles, and inshallah, we'll have a part 2 to this to talk about how entrepreneurship is important to the wider community and the world more generally. But I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on any other benefits.
The last thing that I just find these things personally. So when we said, we actually had a little contradiction which we'll unpack. You get less time and you get more time as well, or maybe you get flexibility on time, but probably less time. So that's good. And the second thing that majorly we spoke about just now was the impact that you have and the benefits that you can bring about, because it's not supposed to be used in a negative way, right? You're supposed to be using wealth and entrepreneurship in a positive way to really change the world as much as you can. And the third thing that I find to be very beneficial as an entrepreneur is that you see the world in a very different light. That's why you can say sometimes businessmen can become a very ruthless person when they do not obviously stick to the guidelines of Islam and the practices and ethical practices that they should have. The ruthlessness comes about from realizing that things are not as they seem. You have to push the bar to make things happen, and that's going to happen all the time. So there's a lot of critical analysis that takes place, and there's a lot of pushing barriers, crossing lines, these kind of things. And that is actually, when it's harnessed in the right way, it's a powerful trait that you have. It's a type of leadership trait that you gain, right? And I find that to be a really beneficial aspect of a business person. Think about a salesman trying to sell something and how difficult it is to go out there and to meet people and for people to tell you no. And then you do that enough times to realize that, you know what, no is more motivation for you to keep going, So that's a third benefit I can see from becoming a good, strong, solid Muslim entrepreneur. It really does give you a perspective of life. And I've seen like some really nice, mashallah, good examples of entrepreneurs myself personally. And I've seen them to be, the most humble people, most caring people, most concerned people about their akhirah and so on. And inshallah, that was because they used it in a positive light. And when you speak to them about certain aspects, they are very mindful of it. And mashallah, those are the people who you really look up to. I think as an individual, looking up to certain types of people in society, those people are really, as you would say, all rounders. The people who you're very happy to see. You would see them in their Porsches and their really nice, expensive cars, as Allah has blessed them as well. So that is even something that we'll touch on. And Allah has given them something, and they're humble in it as well. And you feel comfortable. You know what? You're the millionaire and the billionaire. I'm happy that you can keep your car. What I'm saying is there is that connection, right? That feeling that sometimes less than have, that they've never been given that wealth, and that's a whole topic, inshallah, because even that was mentioned in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with those Sahaba who had been given affluence and those who had not been given affluence, and that kind of synergy that should be created. But anyway, the point I'm making is some of those businessmen who have real concern and are really trying their best, you can see that sense of closeness even with those people who are less fortunate, because they're happy that this person really does try. He does make an effort. Look how humble he is, and we know of the wealth that he controls. So mashallah, I think it really puts you in a place where I don't think there's any other way in your daily routines of life that gives you all these benefits, as much as being a trader, an entrepreneur, and a business person.
Inshallah. I want to make 3 quick points, if I can remember them. Old age is getting to me now. First one is, this idea that the reason why these people are so loved and admired is because everybody sees what, I think it was our pious predecessors, one of the pious predecessors said that when it comes to money, it should be in your hand and not in your heart. And that's how it is with some of those people, not with everybody, but those ones who have elevated themselves to that level by Allah's mercy are the ones who really, like you say, it's in their hand. They make use of it. They use it for good, and they can benefit from it as well. And inshallah, we'll talk about that one day. Like you say, they can have the nice car and all of these things, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. So you can see that their love isn't for the money of it in and of itself. It's for the good that they can do with it and how they can benefit people. The second point, I suppose, is just thinking about, going back to one of the questions we had at the beginning and thinking about this idea of success. I think we've spoken about this before. People always think about, well, what is a successful business? And I just wanted to make this point, because where we do talk about, yes, having the money, and some people have done really well, mashallah. Some of that obviously will be to do with talent and those sorts of things. But we also know that so much of this is predestined. By Allah's mercy and his wisdom, two people can have exactly the same business and do exactly the same thing at the same time, and one of them will get and one of them won't, because Allah knows what's best for people. And so I just don't want people to think, because there's so much of this now, and I'm sure loads of people have seen the adverts on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all these sorts of things, where we have people, including Muslims, talking about, oh, come and do my course and you can become an entrepreneur and you can earn $20,000, £20,000 every month by sitting at home and not doing anything. Like, mashallah, you know, what an amazing, that course must be unbelievable, because I've never heard of anyone doing that. That's not to say there aren't a handful of people who, you know, either as a blessing or a curse, make money and do really well quite quickly, but they're 0.0001% of people, except they're the ones that everyone talks about. And the majority of people aren't necessarily going to end up being super wealthy, but that's not always the intention of running a business, and that's not necessarily what defines success. And I know we've spoken about this before. When people ask me and when I think about what success is, there's just one main metric that I have, is did it bring me closer to Allah Azza wa Jal or not? Because even if I didn't make money and it brought me closer to Allah, what an amazing success. But if I made billions and it took me further away from Allah Azza wa Jal, like what a failure, you know. So that was my second point. And then the third point, really, or just a question rather, would be, a lot of people listening to this will be wanting to start a business and might not have done it before. You know, they're aspiring entrepreneurs. Do you have any tips you can share with those people?
Yeah. So on the second point, I really love that. You know, if it brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and or if it takes you further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that should be the judge of, is this going to be beneficial or is it going to become a problem for you? And lastly, you know, on the third point, some tips, right? I think one of the things in this conversation, it's a very practical thing. You know, we've had some experiences around the circle, doing business, obviously trying to gain Allah's pleasure and try to be as best as we can as believers. One of the things that I can tell you from my own personal experience is that business itself, or doing some type of trade and trying to earn on your own, it's one of the things that we should be considering as how you earn your wealth. And I think the reason why I'm saying that is because it really goes away from many people's lives, where they have the normal job and they would go every day and they would come home every day. One of the things I started when I was, you know, when I became a graduate, the first thing is I started in the masjid and I started teaching. And then after that, I started with my trade on the side, buying and selling stuff. And then afterwards, I went into a school and an institute, personal, you know, journey. And then I continued doing things on the side that would always obviously benefit me. But one of the things I started realizing personally is that I could probably never go into a normal job. You know, I don't think I have the capacity to ever go into that. And the point I'm making is I never went into it fully, but I realized with passion that I can never do it. Right. So I think
I just want to say something on that. Like, that's so true. I think most of the people that I meet who are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, it's not like, everyone has this assumption that it's about the money. And for most people that I meet, including myself, it's not about the money. Like, I probably could be earning more right now if I'd stayed in my job. And I had a career, and my whole life I've just always been doing something on the side, you know, the side hustle as they call it. And my job, alhamdulillah, was really good. I had a lot of flexibility. The pay, mashallah, was really good. But I was never satisfied because all I ever wanted to do was to run my own business. And just as like such a cliche, was coming up to the age of 40, and I was like, oh, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And so, you know, I made the leap when I was 40 and started doing it full time. And we'll have a whole conversation about that one day, about, you know, going from 9 to 5 to doing your own thing. But you're absolutely right. I think for most people who have that entrepreneurial passion, working for somebody else and not having that freedom to do things your way, even if it falls flat on its face, it doesn't matter. Like the fact that I got to express myself and come up with ideas and do it myself, working for somebody else is really stifling, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I'm saying. Instead of giving tips, I'll just tell you some of my life lessons in this path that I'm in, right? That, you know, I just can't do it anymore. And so that's one of the big things for me, right? Further on tips for an entrepreneur. I think we've covered that. You know, it does have a certain connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you would be making more du'as, you'd be having more reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will have a better ability to understand the Allah being in control of everything.
Yeah. I'm thinking more of if someone wants to start a business tomorrow, right? They've never done it before. What bits of advice would you give them?
So I think the first thing is that you have to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even before the dua, as you know, sometimes with regard to knowledge, there's a whole chapter, and I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but you have to seek knowledge first. So that is even seeking knowledge comes before your even faith, because how can you believe in Allah without understanding the ma'rifah or the recognition of what Allah is? You know, who is Allah? What is the greatness of Allah? So then you can believe in it. So there's a whole chapter that comes up in Imam Bukhari's book of Hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari, as we know it as. So in that as well, I would say start gathering information. Start understanding if this is for you. Start looking at avenues or niches or any type of business ideas that you may have. Start investigating, start doing a little bit of feasibility study, see if that makes sense. You know, is this idea something with a business? So I would try to gather as much information I can and keep doing that. Be observant, you know, being observant is, you know, one of the keys that you will have, the acumen of a businessman. You'll always be looking around and searching for things. Even if you're not doing it, you have like about 1,000 ideas that you can start with if you wanted to. So start observing.
That's one of the problems. I think we have too many ideas.
Yeah, so start observing and start gathering information. And then really that second step comes is make a lot of dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make dua to Allah, do istikhara, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for opening up that idea, that field, putting barakah in it. Istikhara itself is basically done when someone wants to make a proper decision. And it's not only for marriage, as misconception goes. It's for any type of decision that you have to make. You turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He knows everything, His knowledge is vast. So take that and knowledge of Allah to guide you. And then after you ask for Allah to put barakah in it and put goodness in it. And then if that is not going to work and it's not going to be beneficial, then turn you away from that and put something that is better and more substantial for you. So that is what the essence of what istikhara is, inshallah. And maybe you can do that a bit further on. The third thing would be to إِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you've now come to these stages of doing the research, making a deep, focused dua about it, then you make a firm decision. And then with that firm decision, you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are generally the 4 steps. First one is you do your research, get the information, you make a lot of dua, and then you put firm footing. You go strong, you go hard, and you move forward with it. And then the last thing is rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now for that to work.
Amazing tips. We'll wrap up. Just one thing to say on that is that step that you mentioned about doing research. Obviously, you can go off and do research yourself, but one of the actions that go together with istikhara is istishara. So doing shura and asking people. Now, this asking people, for anyone who hasn't started a business, ask people who know about business. Right? So when we do istishara about this important decision you want to make, don't go and ask somebody who doesn't know anything about business. Go to people who know about those topics. If you have someone, a mentor would be amazing. So you can get their advice on what good ideas might be, whether they think you might be a good fit for business, and so on. If you go to the wrong people, there are a lot of people who will give you bad advice because they just don't know any better. And unfortunately, there are also some people who don't like to see people succeed, and they get scared, and so they'll make you scared, and it's not the right sort of people to go to. So do istishara, but do it with the right people.
And that brings up so much conversations. And we do have to close up here, right?
I know.
But I'll tell you.
We do. But I think... Sorry, go on, Sheikh.
I'll tell you one of those really nice... I don't know if it's from someone or whatever, but a nice quote that I got. And I really find this to be a profound principle of life. It's learn from the mistakes of others, the mistakes that you shouldn't make. And learn from the success of others so that you can reach success faster through their success. Right? So I found
that's amazing. Yeah, that's so true.
And that's essentially what you do. You really don't go to everyone and ask them, hey, do you think this is a good business idea? Do you think this is a good business idea? No, you don't do that. Go to the people in the field. So you'll quickly learn what they do and what they don't do and what they will stay away from, and that will give you a quick successful method. I'm not saying you take everything from them, because obviously now you have to take that information and process it, and then you will know inshallah what steps to take. But the point is that don't throw out all your ideas to everyone as well, because that can really become detrimental as well, because people will have their own take. As you say, al-mar'u yaqisu ala nafsi. Most people, they would understand things based on their own understanding, or they would give you information relative to their own situation. So that's how you're going to get it. So, be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so almost as if we'd planned it, I think there's a good opportunity to talk about, just very briefly, Tijarah Academy. So this is one of the reasons you and I decided to start Tijarah Academy. There are a lot of people out there who want to start businesses. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. There are, unfortunately, a lot of charlatans, I would say, out there. As another thing, don't take advice from people who haven't done it themselves. So if someone's promising you that you can sit at home and make £20,000 a month by not doing any work, maybe check if they've done that themselves. Now, I don't know about you, Sheikh, but I'm not a millionaire. I'm assuming you're not a millionaire either. And so I don't think either of us will be able to tell you, oh, this is how you can become a millionaire, which is what a lot of people tend to do online these days. But between us, I think we've started a fair few businesses in our lives, and we have a little bit of experience under our belts as well. So that's why we started Tijarah Academy. We'll be interviewing, inshallah, lots of other people who have started their own businesses, and they'll share their tips with all the viewers, and we'll find other experts as well. And inshallah, we're planning to build a community around this. So if you're interested in starting a business, or you have a business, small business that you are struggling to grow, join and follow the community, join the Tijarah Academy tribe, inshallah. You can check out the website, tijarah.academy. So just www.tijarah.academy, and there might be some links in the description. And we'll probably leave it there for today. I've taken enough of your time. Sheikh, as always, it's been an amazing conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode, inshallah.
Jazakumullah. I really appreciate that as well. I'll end with us saying as well, that's the benefit of our conversations here as well. It's going to be something that is applicable to our lives as people. And I find that to be the core of and that maybe differentiates what we're doing here from the others, because it really gives us that live reality that we can, inshallah, share with others in some of the lessons that we learned, and inshallah benefit others as well.
Inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan. And I will see you on the next episode. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.